What is going on, everybody? In this video we're going to walk through how to deploy a VM on GCP with Docker and Docker Compose installed with Terraform. Actually, I set out to start making a video about the fastest ways to get going with Docker and Docker Compose in a VM on GCP, but it kind of morphed into something else. And there were a lot of kind of gotchas along the way, so this video is really just focusing on deploying with Terraform. So let's jump right in. So I'm just going to go out here and open up a web browser and go to GitHub, Michael Shoemaker, my name. I guess the address bar doesn't get bigger when I zoom. So if I go in here, I'm not very organized, but we're looking for Docker install with Terraform. And if we just go in there, go to code, grab the HTTPS link, open a terminal, and we will git clone that, and then cd into the directory. And I'm going to start Visual Studio Code with just code dot, meaning start Visual Studio Code in this directory. And you're going to see some files here. There's a README, maybe not the best written, which is why I'm going to add this video link to it. Okay, so Terraform install. Nothing too interesting here. I literally went out and grabbed all the install commands from Terraform, except for the fingerprint, and I am on Linux Mint, so I changed this to Ubuntu codename, just because the way a lot of commands are out there for Linux, they assume you're on Ubuntu, and it's going to give the Linux Mint code name if you're installing on Mint, but what you really want is the Ubuntu release that's based off of. I know that's a lot. You can just kind of wave your hand and fast forward for a moment if that doesn't apply to you, but if you are on Ubuntu or Linux Mint, you should be able to follow along just fine. So if I just do Terraform install, go out to their website, and do Linux. These are the commands I copied. Again, I don't think I did the fingerprint. Let me check. Yeah, I just left that out. Maybe being a bit lazy, but that works for me. So here, that's going to substitute the release name of your OS. If you're on Ubuntu, that works fine. But again, if you're on Mint, that's going to cause some issues. So here I can just echo that out. And here it says Vera. Well, that's not a valid release. If I go ahead and cat out etc, if I can spell, OS release, I actually want Jammy, which is the Ubuntu release that Vera is built off of. So I kind of stole, borrowed, however you want to phrase that, from the Docker Compose install, and just use the Ubuntu code name rather than the version code name. So if we echo that out here, Jammy is indeed what we want. And if we go to the Docker install, you can see I just really copied all of that. And actually, we don't need the new GRP Docker, which just refreshes the group. It's kind of like you log out and log back in, but this will be installing with root, so we don't need that. Okay, I know that's a lot. Let's get back on track with the setup. So you will need a GCP account. If you are signing up for the first time, they give you like $300 in free credits. If you're just following along and don't have the free credits, it's honestly going to cost you probably about, I don't know, 10-20 cents. So if I just go to console, you can see I'm already logged in. This project is fine. I'm going to click the hamburger. If it's your first time, I think you will need to make a project name, or they might give you a default. But either way, once you get your project going, we want to go to Compute Engine, VM Instances. You might be greeted with a big kind of blue box that says Enable API. Click that, it'll take a few minutes, and then you'll see something similar to this screen. Okay. So another thing we will need to set up is an SSH key pair, which will allow us to connect to the instance once it's running. So if you just do GCP SSH keygen, click on the first link, and copy that. I'm going to Control L to clear that out a bit. And there are two things you'll need to change. The username, this is going to be the user on the VM that you're going to log in as. And then you want a key file name. And I already called this Docker demo, I believe, and ran that. It's going to create a private key and a public key in your SSH directory. I'm just going to Control C out of that, change to my home directory.ssh and grep Docker. And you can see when I ran that command, I got my private key, the one with the .pub extension, is the public key, the one we need to put onto into GCP. So I'm going to cat that out. And just grab the whole thing and copy. Come back here. If I just search for metadata, you should see metadata compute engine. Actually, we want to go to SSH keys. If you already have one here, you can click edit, and then you'll get an add item button and just paste the contents there. I don't have any at the moment, so I'm just going to paste that in, save. And what this is going to do is it's going to take that public key, and every VM instance in this project that you create, it's going to put the public key into that instance so that you can SSH to it. All right. So going back to the code here, I'm going to close that. I might as well save that. Oh, and let me cancel that. I should point out, because when this starts up, the startup script, which we'll get to here shortly, is going to run as root. So that name that you gave, well, of course I didn't execute it. That name, when you generated the key pair, you are going to want to update the install Docker here and put that name here. That's going to add that user to the Docker group, so then you can run Docker. Okay. And if you don't have Terraform installed, you're just going to want to control the little backtick mark, which is the key, usually under your escape key. And then you'll just chmod +X to make it executable. and the Terraform install file is what we want to make executable. And then you would just / to run that, and that'll install. I already have that installed, so I'm going to skip that. And I think we're pretty much ready to go. We have our SSH public key. Actually, we do have one more step. We need a way to tell GCP through Terraform that we do indeed have rights to create resources in this project. And to do that, if you have the gcloud SDK installed, you can just gcloud auth application default login, I believe. It'll open this up. You'll see your account. That's me. I want to continue. I think sometimes it prompts you with your password. I'm not sure what elicits that behavior. But if it prompts you for it, just log in. That's going to place an authorization, well, an authorization key, I believe, in your system, which basically Terraform's going to look for by default when you're using the Google provider. You could also create a service account and get the service account JSON key, and I'll point out how you would do that when we get there. So let's switch over to our code, and I want GCP main.tf. Actually, let me get rid of this altogether so we can see. So we have the required providers. If you go to Terraform's website, it says you need required providers. So you don't. I started going down a rabbit hole with this in version 0.12. They didn't use required providers in version 0.13 of Terraform. They started using it basically when providers started to be made by organizations other than HashiCorp. You see the namespace here. So it's just to stay organized, I suppose. But if you want to test that yourself, you can honestly just delete that off. It should run fine. But it is best practice to have those required providers, and here to make the version as broad as possible. You could definitely just use this as is, at least as of April 22nd, 2024. Okay. So here, if you don't have gcloud SDK, don't want to use it for whatever reason, you would, in your GCP account, go down to I am admin, service accounts, create a service account. I'll say test. And then what role? Let me search for compute engine. And you could do compute engine admin. That's probably a little bit too broad. If you were doing something in production, you would just want to research what are the bare minimum rights that I need to create and destroy VMs. And I think that would probably do it. I'll just walk through this real quick just in case somebody wants to do it. So I've got this test here. I would go over here, manage keys, add key, create new key. JSON is fine. Create, that would show up as a download up here in the upper right. And then switching back to here, I actually have variables set up just to kind of demo how those work. and then you would put a path to your key there. And you could definitely, if you're just using this to create VMs with Docker and Docker Compose, you could get rid of this variables file and do it all in main. So you would just take these defaults here and substitute those where you see the corresponding variable. I just put that in there just to kind of show, well, this is how you use a variables file. All right, so project, the project I happen to be using just so happens to be called Kester Demo. My region is US Central 1. My zone is US Central 1A. And if you wanted to use more variables, you definitely could. You could do one for the name, one for the machine type. You know, modify it to whatever suits your needs. And then I do have some locals here, variables. So these are just going to read in the install Docker, which we already saw. That's going to do an update. It's going to install some prerequisites. Going to add to our key rings. It's going to put the repository into the repositories it looks for updates and installs on the VM. And then it's going to install Docker, Docker Compose, and add the user Gary. In my case, if you generated your SSH key with a different name, put that there and put them in the Docker group. And then the date flag. Okay, a lot of this was just for testing, but I left it all in there because I think it's pretty good to kind of demonstrate what's going on. So this is just a Python file. It's going to get the date and time, format that into year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and it's going to write that to a file in etc flag.txt. And it's going to write that saying the file was created at that date time. Okay. And let's see, we name it Ubuntu Docker. You can change that to whatever you'd like. E2 medium is always a pretty good machine type. Okay, so image. These are kind of hard to find, but actually the only way I know how to do this is to use gcloud. So here, Control L to clear that out. And gcloud compute machine types, you're going to get all the machine types that there are if you run it just like that. So I'm going to grep Ubuntu. Oh, I think I need to update the GitHub repo to have list. And it does take a minute to kind of parse through all those. Or if I typed it in wrong. Oh, yep, it told me it wanted list or describe. We'll give that a moment. And I don't want to hold us up here. Compute machine types list. Oh, that should have worked. Let's see. Did I spell Ubuntu wrong? Let's try it without the grep. But this is where you would find the machine type that you would like. And actually, let me grab that just because it's going to bother me. And I don't want that in the back of my head. Yeah, machine types list. Okay, I should be able to grep on that. Ubuntu. And you can see where they're available and all that good stuff. I'm going to let that run for a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and switch back here. So that's where you would find an image to use. The network interface, if you have different networks, give it the name of the appropriate network that you want it to go in. And you do need this access config empty, because that will be used here at the bottom to output the IP address. Okay, so here we go. I just use this for testing. You could actually delete this line. You will want to delete this line if your user isn't Gary. So I will just... that was just testing if the flag file was present in the etc directory, because I was troubleshooting there. So this is a startup script. You can start with this EOF and end with this EOF down here for end of file. And basically it just says, hey, use bash. Is there a file called flag.txt in the etc directory? If there's not, then go ahead and update, install gcloud. It's going to take the local that we defined up here. It's going to take those scripts, the Python file and the Docker install, and it's going to write them to the temp directory. It's then going to make them executable, although I don't think I really need that with the Python file, come to think of it. This was just me troubleshooting again. If you're curious, you can uncomment that, and it's going to say, who's running this startup script? And it turns out it is root. It's going to take bash, it's going to run the Docker install, and then it's going to use Python 3, which is where Python is installed on the Ubuntu image I'm using, and it's going to run the date flag Python file. Otherwise, if it does have a flag file, it's just going to exit. So why do this? So a startup script is going to run every time your machine starts up. Not really much harm in this case, but that means if I just shut down and reboot, if I didn't have this logic here, it would try to do the installs again, which it just seems like a waste and definitely not best practice. So I'm going to that is really going to bother me. I will move on. Actually, I'm gonna grep standard, because I see lots of standard here. While that's running, again, control the tick mark, the key under your escape key, and we will need to cd into the GCP directory. Make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to need to run Terraform init to download the providers, in this case the Google provider from HashiCorp. We'll give that a moment. So see, that did pull down the standard. Okay, and now just to show that we are creating the VM, I'm going to, oh, it was this window. I'm going to scroll down to Compute Engine here. VM instances. We don't have any. So I'm just going to do, if you want to see what it's going to do, Terraform apply, and you'll see what's going to happen. There's my image, which somehow is not being returned there. And you want to perform these actions? Yes. And you could have just done Terraform apply and just typed yes to run it. It will take a little bit to come up, and just be aware there are a few things, so those installs will take some time, and also for the SSH service to come up. So even after this completes, give it maybe 2-3 minutes, because you're not going to be able to SSH to it. Again, give it a few minutes, you'll be able to go in, and even then, once you're in, if you try to run Docker, you're going to get an error saying you don't have permissions, and that just is because you logged in before it got to that point in the script. So I'm going to give this a moment or two, and then we'll pick back up here shortly. Okay, I gave that maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and in that time I did a quick Google, and so what I want is not machine types, I want machine images, I believe, or compute images. So machine types are going to be, well, if we switch back here, if I can. So machine types are going to be the type of machine. I'm guessing a VM on GCP, kind of the hardware that is emulating or using, and then the image is going to be the OS that we're going to put on there. So now, if we do machine images, or compute images, I am definitely striking out a lot. And of course it does take a minute. We'll probably see 2 or 4 here if I recall correctly, or a bunch. I'm just pretty familiar with these, so I know I want jammy. I know I don't want ARM, so this is most likely the AMD version here. So that's the one I went with. 2024 318. Let me double check. Okay, I did 307. Oh, I did focal. Well, that's why it's a good thing in the Docker install we have that kind of dynamically set. And actually, version code name is okay here because I know it's Ubuntu. They don't have Mint offered as far as I know on GCP, but could update that as well. But that's a rabbit hole I just went down. So back on track. If I just go here, and now I should be able to SSH the username that we set with the SSH key, and in the Docker install file, I'm just going to grab this IP, copy that, add the fingerprint, and here we are. And now we can check that Docker is good to go. Docker run hello world. And it's pulling it, and it's running. Yay. Okay. If you did this and got a permission denied, you probably jumped the gun a little bit, and you would just need to do new grp docker. And then try to run that again. Again, that's just refreshing the rights for your user into the Docker group. So you should be good to go. If you tried to SSH and were getting permission denied, give it a few minutes. That should work. And then if we go to the etc directory and ls, and we're going to grep for the flag.txt, and we can cat that out. And this is a different time zone than I'm in, but when you shut down and restart, get a new IP address. Although that is a good aside, let me see if I can do that real quick here. If I just do a Terraform, that wraparound is killing me. Destroy. That's going to clean up the VM and get rid of all the resources that are defined in our Terraform files. Hopefully that'll go down real quick. I've noticed lately, or maybe just because I'm playing around in it a lot more, I'm getting the same IP address. If that happens, you will get an error saying to run SSH-R to remove that entry from your local machine because it doesn't match. So just go ahead and run that, and then you should be able to SSH back in. Another gotcha here is I chose the etc directory. You could probably also do your user's home directory. When I was looking around, I saw a bunch of information to put it in whack var whack run. But playing around with that, it's a symbolically linked directory to the whack run directory, which seems to be created at startup. I know that's a whole lot, but just don't put your flag file in var run or the run directory, because when that startup script fires, it's not going to see that file. So it's going to run the startup script every time. And I'm going to just do a Terraform apply to recreate our VM and run the Docker and Docker Compose installs again. And I just want to see if I can get the same IP address as we got last time so I can show that error. Of course, I'm recording, so it's not going to work out like that. 13.97. All right, I did. So, again, connection refused. It is still starting up the SSH service and the VM. And yes, something worked for once. Okay, it's telling us the fingerprint doesn't match. So run this. Let's give ourselves a little more room here. Again, I just copied this line here. And if I go ahead and paste that, and actually if I did that quick enough, docker run hello world, and it's telling me it can be installed. That's probably because that startup script is still running. So I will give that just another moment. There we go. So our startup script has run. It has done the install. It says, well, Docker's here, but we have a session going, and it added us to the group, but those permissions aren't applied to our user as of this session. So new grp docker to refresh it. If you try to up arrow now, you get nothing because this is indeed a new session. Docker run hello world, and there we go. Okay, I know that was a lot. I will update that so the compute images, you can list those correctly. Some things you could do here, you could also not put the SSH key in the metadata so it goes on all the compute engines that you create. You could do that in Terraform. If you're going to set this project down for a while, and here let's refresh this, you can click on your VM that's running, and let's see, there should be a machine image here. I'm sure it's right in front of me, and I'm not seeing it. Do I need to click into here? There we go. Create machine image. And you could just call this something like Ubuntu with Docker Compose. Give it a description. You could create that, and then, I mean, you could limit that. I put US multi-region, which I don't believe you necessarily need to do. You could limit it to one region, and then, oh, not create image. Sorry if I'm moving the mouse a lot. I tend to do that. Go back to VM instances, create instance. Instance name you could change. And, oh, here we go. New VM instance from machine image. And then we could just create that, and it will have Docker and Docker Compose installed. If we go to from a template, that's a little odd. It did not have me select a template. I thought that was going to drop me into this section where I could create one. And I think this is probably going a bit long, so I'm not going to go down into all of this. But just know you could definitely put these scripts into Google Cloud Storage, you know, copy them from there, and then management, automation, you could put your startup script here. You'd probably need to finagle that a little bit to get it to work with, I mean, you could put the Docker and Docker Compose install, those files in here, put the logic to create the flag, all that stuff, but it's probably just easier in Terraform. So anyway, again, going a bit long, let's just recap. So have a GCP account. Easiest way to get Terraform to be able to build and take down resources is to use the gcloud SDK. Don't use the default auth login. Use the application login, and then generate SSH key. Put that into your metadata, and then don't forget to update the Docker install file with that name, and then yeah, you can spin those up, take them down really quickly, and you don't need to worry about accidental costs. And of course, we'll do a Terraform destroy, And that should be taking the VM down. I'm going to go back and see what the heck that VM I created without an instance template is. I'm really hoping that wasn't like some crazy GPU, because that would be a surprising bill. And we will see that this VM disappear here shortly. Let's see how it looks here. 30 seconds. Usually takes under a minute, so we'll give it just another moment. That'll probably take a few minutes. All right. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully this helps speed up your spinning up VMs with Docker and Docker Compose and didn't just confuse you more. And that's it for this video, and I'll see you in another one.